I'm Ryan. I'm a science teacher.
I'm Cheryl, and I slept through science.
Each episode will tackle a science question you may have learned in school, but can't quite remember or fully explain.
And I'll take the risk of asking the dumb questions so that we can all understand the science we slept through.
The bell has rung. Let's get started. Welcome to lesson 37. This is our houseplant unit. Cheryl, do you have more questions about your houseplants?
I do have more questions about my houseplants for our Cheryl's houseplant unit.
Oh,
Thanks
yeah,
for
sorry.
asking.
Cheryl's houseplant unit. I keep forgetting. How do I keep forgetting that?
Well, once again, like last week, I have another picture of my houseplants to show you. So I thought I would
Yes,
just start
please.
out by showing you this picture and we can chat about it.
Okay.
This was from sometime a year ago or so. And this is my big viney plant.
That's the technical term, right? Viney plant?
Yep, big viney plant.
Yep.
And so you can see I must have held my phone really up high to take this photo. It's in my kitchen.
Yeah, you must have held the phone up high or stood on a chair.
Maybe
or something.
I stood on a chair. I really wanted to capture this awesome vine on this plant.
This is clearly in your kitchen. You can see the kitchen countertop. We're looking towards a corner.
Yeah.
There's a window that is right behind the sink. And in the sill of the window, there's a pot. And are there two different types of plants in that pot? One's a vine and one's not?
No, it's just one in that pot.
Okay. And so it must be wrapped around itself in that part because it's not viney.
No, it just shoots off some vines sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Some of them are just short little leaves.
Okay. Well, there's one vine that's kind of going straight up the side of the windowsill, and then it kind of curves and goes across on the top of the cabinets that are kind of the upper cabinets above the countertop. So that's where we're talking about it being extra high. That's how we can tell that you must have held the phone up high.
Yes. Yeah, good description of it. So I think what's really fascinating to me about what this plant did that I want to talk about today is that you can see about maybe the first 2 feet of that vine. You can see the size of those leaves are I don't know, 2 inches, maybe 3 inches.
Okay.
And then you can see that around the time where it hits the top of the window and then starts going on the cabinet, those leaves are I don't know, 6 inches. They're big.
Yeah.
They're a lot bigger. Yes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you why that happened. And then I want to talk about it because I have questions. That happened because during the time that those initial 2 feet of leaves were growing, that vine was not on the window like that. It was just laying. It was just laying along the bottom of the windowsill.
Okay.
And the leaves were growing just sitting there, and they would keep growing leaf after leaf. And
so
then
horizontal.
Yes. Yeah. Just hanging out, just sitting there.
Okay.
And then my sister, who I'm going to reference in every one of these houseplant episodes, I was talking to her like I do. And I was saying that I wanted ways to figure out how to position the plant. And she was saying that you can get those little clear command hooks and put them on the side of the wall near the window. And then you just hook the little vine into it. And then that helps it grow up. Cause I was like, does it grab onto the wall or and she was like, it can, but not really enough to support it necessarily. And so she said to do that. So then I did that. And then all of a sudden the leaves were at least twice as big when they were growing. And
so all of the ones that I saw in the picture that were so much larger, those grew after you had taken it from being horizontal to being vertical.
Yes. And they were growing up. They got huge. And the actual vine that all the leaves are growing off of got at least twice as thick.
Oh, okay. Well. Can't see that in the picture, but that's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so interesting to watch this transformation that this plant took. And I just thought that's the size of the leaves. That's how big they grow. And then all of a sudden it became a different size plant as they were growing vertically instead of horizontally. So I asked my
Mm.
sister about this, and it sounds like it's that when they need to support themselves and grow up and actually do climbing, that they
Mhm.
need to be bigger and stronger to do that.
Okay.
And so the leaves knew what position they were in.
Uh-huh.
The plant knew, and it adjusted the size of leaves it was growing to be able to grow upwards and be stronger, since it was
Okay.
on a wall and not just flopping around
Okay.
on my kitchen windowsill.
Okay.
So, how does my plant know how to do that? Is that actually what's happening? Why is that like, what's it doing? I don't know. I don't know exactly what my question is yet, but I want to talk about it.
Okay. Very interesting. First of all, that you made that observation. So that's helpful information, because if you just see the picture without knowing what happened,
Mhm.
it looks like you just have little leaf, little leaf, little leaf, little leaf, big leaf, big leaf, big leaf. And then actually, I don't know if you noticed, but then along the cabinets, it's going horizontal again,
Yeah, they got
and it
smaller
has a
again.
few smaller leaves again,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
But without knowing that it was horizontal initially, you wouldn't necessarily be able to make the connection between those two things.
totally.
Yeah. Okay. You said it has something to do with being stronger
Yeah.
to support it. And you also asked, like, how does the plant know, or does even the plant know that it's
Yeah.
growing upwards? Well, let's start with the stronger part. Do you think that's true? And do you think that's true for both the stem and the leaf size? Like the stem
Yeah.
thickness you talked about.
I absolutely think it's true. I think if it needs to do some climbing, then it needs to do more work to
Okay.
climb.
Okay.
So I don't know if it uses more energy or if it's just it
Mm,
needs to do more work. So it needs to be stronger to support itself so it
okay.
can stay upright and not fall. Like I think about like obviously this house plant was not originally a house plant
Sure.
or this
Sure.
type of house plant. It's like so if it's going to grow like up along a tree or however
Mm-hmm.
they grow in nature,
Mm-hmm.
um then I'd wonder about then they don't have command hooks helping them out, and they probably need to
Yeah.
get big and strong to be able to just grow up the side of a tree.
Yeah. Okay. What a and how would big leaves help with that?
Oh, well, the leaf is what absorbs the sunlight.
Okay.
So if it has more leaves and bigger leaves, then there's more surface area that's absorbing sunlight, which means it can get more energy and nutrients from the sun. Just eat more food.
Okay. And then the other thing is, do you think the plant knows the direction that it's growing?
Yeah, I think plants know some things.
Okay. How
Like,
do you think it knows?
well, I don't know how, but like we had ivy in my parents' yard and it would get in the strangest places and it felt like it was like sneaking in place. Like I plants know something on some level, not the way we know things, but like
Okay.
they definitely know which way the sun is because
Okay.
I have plants that sit in my windowsill and all the leaves start facing the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that. And I think they know directions as far as roots too. So yeah, plants definitely know the directions. And so I think they do know which direction they're growing and I don't know if it's like an adaptation, like if it falls under that, or what it falls under that what they're doing exactly. But I think it knows what it needs to do.
Knows what it needs to do. What do you mean?
It knows it needs to get stronger to climb up a wall.
Hmm. So it knows that it's pointing up and therefore knows that it needs to get stronger to
Yeah.
continue to go up. Is that kind of what
Yeah.
you mean? Okay. Do you think, you said that you don't think plants know in the same way that we do?
I think maybe they know in the same way our bodies know, but not in the same way like our brains know things. I mean, our bodies react to things too. So I think it's
Hmm.
like a very like physical knowledge that they
Okay.
have.
And do you know even how our bodies know things if our brains don't?
Well, there's some things that just are natural and our bodies just do. I mean, even like pumping blood or like any, anything. Like
Yeah.
our bodies just do things. I don't know how they know things. But there's lots of things our bodies just do without us even really being
Yeah.
aware of it, like
Yeah.
fighting off diseases or,
Uh-huh.
all
Uh-huh.
sorts of things.
Hmm. So you're
Um,
saying it's a similar thing where we don't have to consciously do all the things that our bodies do. Similarly for plants, they don't have to have like a conscious awareness of something in
yes.
order to respond to something
Yes.
that's changed around it.
I think it's similar to like if you exercise a lot, your muscles get stronger.
Okay. Let's start our lesson by talking about the first thing that you talked about, which is plants being stronger when they're growing up. And they are stronger, just like you observed. You know, the thicker stems do help support the plant, both to just kind of give it a rigidity, and then also, obviously, the higher it grows, kind of the more top heavy it is, right? And the more
Mm,
likely it is to kind of fall over. And a lot of plants that are vine like growers will often grab onto things. They'll
mm,
often either send out like tendrils, or often at the very tip, there's something that kind of, it almost like spirals around over time. Like you don't see it spiral, but if you watch it over time, you'll notice that it kind of is kind of going around in like a little kind of circle, looking for something to grab onto. And like with a wall, it doesn't have that, but you know, you put those command hooks or whatever, it gives them those things to hang on to like they would out in nature. And yeah, that's part of it. For the leaves being larger, you hit on some of the things that I do think are part of it. They are able to, if they have more surface area, they're able to collect more light, which means they
hmm.
can do more photosynthesis, which means they can have more energy to be able to grow more,
Yeah.
right? Also, and I don't know how much of this is which actual factor. So some of this is my own kind of insertion of things I understand from other places, and whether or not it directly applies to vine growing plants, I'm not 100% sure. But oftentimes, especially in really tropical regions, the plants are competing for that sunlight.
Oh.
And so if they're growing higher and they can then therefore have larger leaves, they can shade any plants that are below them from getting
Okay.
as much sunlight, which means they can't grow and they aren't a competition to that plant. So having those bigger, broader leaves allows them to take more of that sunlight for themselves, but also means that there's less of it for any other plant it might be competing with.
Mm,
So again, I don't know for sure that that's exactly what's going on here with your plant in particular, but it could be that it gives it a competitive advantage against any other plants that are trying to grow in that same area. If it goes up and then goes broadly out, it shades and prevents other plants from growing as successfully as it does.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it did shade my soap dispenser pretty effectively. So, yeah, good job, house plant.
Yep, it outcompeted the soap dispenser. There you go. It's successful. It's successful. And then the other thing that you talked about was plants knowing things.
Hmm.
And what does that look like and how does it know? And it doesn't know, obviously, in the same way that we as humans consciously know, but our bodies do things or are aware of things that others aren't. And in a broad sense, one of the things that you actually latched onto is one of the characteristics of living things. And, how do we define if something's alive or not? That's a whole different question that can be very tricky to answer. But there's often characteristics that are common in things that we consider alive. And one of them is living things respond to their environment.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that is part of what you're talking about, whether it's light, and you talked about that, plants that grow towards the light, or, they notice their orientation and they grow, up or down or whatever, and they respond as their environment changes. And all living things, as a general rule, are able to respond to changes in their environment. Now, they might not all respond in the same way or at the same speed, all of those things. But when you change something about their environment, they tend to respond in some way, do something differently than they did before. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's really funny because one of the examples I was going to give you earlier that I didn't, when I was thinking about our bodies and what we do naturally, is when you're driving in the car and you turn the corner.
Yep.
And there's that lean. You naturally, your body does a lean. And my dog would do it in the car, which means it's not like, oh, it's humans thinking about this. Like this other living thing in the car would do.
Now, when you say
the
a
lean.
lean, I could understand that in two different ways. Are you talking about when you turn, let's say you're turning left? Are you talking about leaning to the right? Or are you talking about counteracting that motion to the right by actively leaning to the left?
The lean to stay upright, I think.
The lean to stay upright. Yeah.
I think
okay.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, because when you are turning in the car, you kind of start moving in a particular direction. And so you compensate for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But
and you said
like,
your dog did the same thing.
Yeah, my dog would do the same thing. And it was like, yes, but if you had like a marble on the floor, it would just like roll all over, So like the difference between the living thing and how it's responding to the change versus an inanimate object.
Yeah. That's a great example. And they're big. You want to learn some fancy science words?
Yes.
Okay. So you use the example of light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that plants tend to grow towards the light. They call that phototaxis.
Yeah. The fancier the word, the more fake it sounds, Ryan. I'm telling you.
Photo.
Yeah.
Means,
like photosynthesis.
So what is photo? What do you think that means? Photosynthesis, photography. Light. Yeah. Light. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So photo, and then taxis. What does that sound like?
Taxes.
Okay, sure. Or
Texas.
how about like a taxi?
Okay.
Okay, and a taxi will move you from one place to another.
So moving towards the light.
Yeah, exactly. Phototaxis. Yep. Okay. The one about up and down, and plants, like when seeds, they're underground, they can't actually see the light always, depending on how deeply, and yet the roots still tend to grow down and the stems tends to grow up, and they call that geotaxis.
Okay.
Geo meaning
earth,
exactly, right? And so it's that motion. As a matter of fact, there was a really cool experiment that was done, and I'll link to a description of it in the description of our podcast, but where there was an experiment where they took seeds and put them on a rotating plate. Think of like a record player type of a thing, right? That's spinning around in a circle. And like you talked about in the car, you can sometimes, when you're turning, it can feel like you're being pulled in a direction, right? So it's almost like simulating gravity, or like that, like a ride at the fair where it spins around and you get like thrown up against the side or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So that sort of thing. And they kept plants on it. And when they did that, the plants, the roots all grew towards the outside of the circle, and the stems all grew towards the inside of the circle.
So they had their own little ride at the fair.
Yes, they did.
But like little roots like went towards the edge.
But like they can tell in a sense where, because that simulated gravity. Right? It's not actually gravity, it's simulated. They've also taken plants up to the International Space Station to see how do they grow in what they call microgravity, which is almost no gravity at all. Technically there is, but it feels like there isn't gravity up there. And so what do? And often the roots will grow in lots of different directions as opposed to straight down. And so there's something
Wow.
that plants can sense, and exactly how they do it, that gets a little bit more complicated. But there are certain structures in cells that we think actually, in a sense, fall to the bottom of the cell. Just like if you were to put a marble in a glass of water, it would sink to the bottom.
Yeah.
Right? Same sort of a thing. And we think maybe that influences the hormones that are released, the proteins that are made, that then tell the plant which direction to grow.
That's so cool.
Yeah, in the same way that we as humans, in our inner ears, there's actual structures that as we move around, they like slosh around, and that's kind of how we can tell balance. And when we're like upside down and sideways and things like that. So there's a physical thing that responds to the gravity or to the motion. And that physical thing actually creates a response within us as an organism or a plant.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I know that part because I've had vertigo before. So I learned
Yeah.
about the inner ear. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it gets messed up, you feel like you're moving even though you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really trippy and not any fun at all.
I was
But
a plant on a rotating plate, as they say.
yes. Yeah. As they say. Yes, they do. Yeah. So with all of those things all together, do you feel like that answers the question as to why the plant was growing up, but then also like how it knows to grow up, or that it was growing up?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
That's very cool.
Yeah. There you go. Plants are smarter than we give them credit for. And now it's time for your quiz, Cheryl.
But Ryan, like a house plant that grows upward along a windowsill, I have outgrown the need for a quiz.
Well, let's see if you're able to outgrow the need of a quiz. The only way to know that is if you pass it.
Oh, dang it. Okay.
Give 2 reasons that plants might grow larger leaves when growing vertical instead of horizontal.
Well, they need more energy. And the way to get more energy is to take in more sunlight. And the way to take in more sunlight is to have a larger leaf with more surface area.
Okay.
Also, it's tough competition out there. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Amazon is not a place for amateurs.
Okay.
And if you're not the best, you're going to get shade from other plants and get no sunlight. So you have to go up, up, up and get big leaves to even make it in this world.
So you're saying that the plants with the larger leaves are throwing shade on the other plants,
Yes.
as the kids would say. Okay. What does phototaxis mean?
Moving towards the light.
What does geotaxis mean?
I'm going to say a spatial awareness of in the earth, because I feel like moving towards the earth feels weird.
Yeah. And it technically, for both of them, it could be towards or away from.
Okay.
It's like moving in response to light or moving in response
to. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. In response to, and with geotaxis, it's usually gravity, but it's gravity from the earth. So
got it.
What is one way that plants might know the direction that they're growing?
Well, gravity.
Okay. How do they know gravity?
We think that there's things in their seed, but then after it's a seed, we think there's still things in them that know gravity. We didn't fully cover that part, I don't think. We talked about the seed.
We talked about the
gravity.
seed. We also talked about inside the cell.
Yes. Oh, that the cell things go to the bottom, maybe?
Yes, things might fall down towards the bottom like a marble in a glass of water.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or also, I'm guessing the location of the sun probably helps too.
It can, yes. But of course, the sun can also be on the horizon.
Sure, but it's not going to be below the horizon.
Correct. Yeah, it's not going to be. Well,
so it's like
it is going to be below the horizon, but then you don't see the light. We call that night. See, look at that. I threw in a little astronomy just for fun.
And night is when the sun goes down. Wow, that's your astronomy class?
Ooh.
Oh boy.
You would be surprised sometimes. But that's another lesson for another day. See what I did there? See what I did there? So why don't you go ahead and pack up your stuff and get ready for my closing remarks. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at I Slept Through Science or on Twitter at Slept Science.
If you have dumb science questions like I do, please send them to us. You can email us at isleptthroughscience@gmail.com, or you can even send us a voice memo and we'll play it on the podcast.
Please rate and review our podcast to tell other people what you think about it, subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode, and share about our podcast on social media.
Thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. Okay, great. Thanks. Bye.
The bell doesn't dismiss you. I dismiss you.